Don Klein, all Metro News. President Obama has nominated a longtime environmental regulator, Gina McCarthy, to take over for Lisa Jackson, who announced in December that she was leaving, to head up the EPA. McCarthy has a long history as an environmental regulator in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and she's been with Lisa Jackson at the EPA for the last 4 years. And she was really one of the driving forces behind the effort to regulate greenhouse gas emissions under the Clean Air Act, which was a big coup for the environmental movement and really problematic for the carbon industry, particularly for coal. But what's it all mean, and assuming she's going to be approved, what's it all mean for the environment, for states like West Virginia, where coal is a big deal? Scott Segal is with Bracewell and Giuliani. He's an attorney who works with clients in the regulatory process on myriad issues, including the energy and the environment. Not to be confused with prominent West Virginia attorney Scott Segal, different Scott Segal. Scott, you probably didn't know there was another Scott Segal, but we do have one in West Virginia, nevertheless.
Right. I am not married to your Supreme Court justice.
Very good. Nice West Virginia reference. Well done. Well done. I'm impressed. So what is Gina McCarthy, is she Lisa Jackson, or is she her own person?
Well, there's some big distinctions between Lisa Jackson and Gina McCarthy, but most of them are stylistic and not on the substance. Let me describe one in particular. Lisa Jackson had a very arm's-length relationship with the community that she regulated, be that the electric utilities or the coal mining industry, et cetera. I don't think she was particularly comfortable dealing with the sort of needs of industrial and manufacturing sectors. By contrast, Gina McCarthy has served as a state regulator under 5 different governors, one of which was Mitt Romney.
Right.
So she's actually had some experience in a Republican administration, and is a very no-nonsense sort of realist type. She's open. She's very direct if you observe her from a communication style. And to that extent, Hoppy, I think it's going to be a welcome relief from Lisa Jackson, who really was very standoffish and was not particularly transparent, even though she promised to be when she was confirmed.
But Scott, is from my standpoint as a West Virginian and one who supports the coal industry, is it going to be, though, the same result? Is the difference between, well, I'm not going to talk to you, but I'm going to screw you, but I'm going to talk to you face to face, I'm still going to screw you. So is it?
I tell you what, you raise a really valid point, because on the substance, the president said both in the inaugural address and in the State of the Union address that he essentially intends to use existing authority to regulate carbon emissions, particularly from the power sector, and that means regulating coal, the use of coal-fired power. And that's a major market, obviously, for coal. Coal still counts for over 30% of U.S. electric power, and so it's a very important market for the domestic industry. And remember, it's Gina McCarthy's shop that is putting together those rules.
Right.
The question is whether she'll be clear-headed enough and balanced enough to not promulgate rules that are technologically impossible to implement and therefore would really disadvantage states like West Virginia. I mean, hope springs eternal, Hoppy. I hope she'll see things the right way and that we'll get a rule that's more flexible. I don't have a lot of confidence in that area. If anything, Barack Obama himself has raised expectations that the next administrator of EPA is really going to take the truncheon to coal-fired power. I'm not so sure that she'll have a lot of political running room to do anything other than write rules that aren't particularly reasonable.
Scott Segal is with.
That's not a good deal.
Scott Segal's with us with Bracewell and Giuliani, works with clients in the regulatory process on multiple issues, including energy and the environment, and he's very familiar with Gina McCarthy. The thought is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we know that with the rules that have been promulgated already, it makes it virtually impossible to build a coal-fired power plant going forward with the technology that's available to try to limit the carbon. So going forward, it's very hard to do. Is she going to go after existing power plants?
Right. Here's how we look at it. Yeah, for the new power plants, they already have a proposed rule which the EPA is seeking to make final. Under that rule, if your coal plant isn't a gas plant,
then you're not.
then you needn't try and build it. I mean, that's really the standard, and it is not one that is technologically feasible for a coal plant to meet. Remember, there's no technology that removes carbon that is readily that is cost effective.
Right.
We do have something called carbon capture and sequestration, but I'll let you in on a little secret. Even carbon capture, there's one facility in the United States is trying to build a carbon capture and sequestration. It's down in Mississippi, and guess who's opposing it? The Sierra Club. Even if you agree to capture the carbon, the enviros don't want you to build that new plant. The relationship
because they keep moving the goalposts. I mean, the Sierra Club was out for coal, and then they said the war on coal's over. Now they're out for gas. I mean, they don't even talk to me about them. No offense to you, but they just keep moving the goalpost. And
my view of it is this: the Sierra Club energy policy is let's satisfy 100% of America's needs with 2% of America's energy.
Yeah.
And that is just irresponsible. It's irresponsible for our schools, our hospitals, folks living at or near the poverty level, manufacturing assets. Everybody suffers under a policy like that.
So they're going to go after existing power plants, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. My view of it is that they'll take what they learn from finalizing the rule for new power plants and try and apply as much of it as is possible to the existing fleet, and that means very, very deep cuts in coal-fired production. I've got to tell you, the coal-fired utilities have already spent or committed to spend billions of dollars in compliance costs to meet the rules that EPA promulgated last year. The so-called mercury and air toxics rule, the cross-state rules, ones that remain on the books despite the newest ones being struck down by the courts. So they've already committed to spend billions and billions of dollars. The next tranche of regulations, which will be carbon, will be on top of that. And as I said to the administrator designate before, will you please at least take into account the fact that the regulated community has already spent billions upon billions before you impose yet more costs? And so I just hope she does.
Well, one thought might be, and I'm oversimplifying this, and I defer to you, but here's a scenario. She's said to be somewhat of a pragmatist. As you said, she'll sit down with people. So it used to be that the coal-fired utilities and the coal industry were kind of in it together. Now I think this sort of everybody's out for themselves. And she sits down with the big utilities and says, look, this is happening. Here's what the rules are going to be. Tell me how you can get there. How do we need to help you? And just achieves it that way by sort of dividing the opposition, saying we're going to work through the utilities and do it that way. And then coal's not even in the conversation. Is that possible?
Well, let me tell you why I don't think that's too likely.
Sure.
Because, we're still looking at over 30% of capacity for electricity being generated, well over 30% being generated from coal. And it's one thing to give coal a haircut, which has already occurred in the utility sector, but it's another thing to usher coal completely out of the picture or really diminish it in a way that, frankly, there's still some lingering uncertainties about natural gas, about supply and volatility in that marketplace. And so it I think makes sense to have a balanced portfolio for any utility.
But do they believe that? The administration doesn't believe that, do they?
Well, it's funny. The President of the United States himself has used the phrase all of the above energy strategy. And I realize that, I think as Governor Romney said in the last electoral cycle, all of the above doesn't just mean all of what's above ground. But it is the case that the new Department of Energy designee, that is Professor Moniz from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, he has written extensively about the need to keep coal in the picture, using carbon capture and sequestration, using alternative uses of coal for motor fuels, etc. He's written extensively on that, as well as written extensively on the need to use natural gas as an important bridge fuel to future technological developments. So, I think the new team is a little better than the old team as far as the notion of keeping diversity in the energy portfolio.
Interesting. All right. So you sound like you got a little spring in your step today, like you're hopeful.
A little bit. I mean, they say the proof is in the pudding, and we'll have to see exactly what kind of rules and programs the new team advances. And of course, we're not going to agree with everything they do. But look, an EPA rule that deals with coal-fired power can be 1,000 pages long. And in 1,000 pages, the EPA makes all kinds of mistakes. Gina McCarthy, at least, was willing to say, you know, there are mistakes in these rules that we've made, and to make what I'd call mid-course corrections to try and straighten them out a little bit. Now, the final rules that she produced over the course of the last 2 years, I still don't agree with them. I think that they overstate the benefits and they understate the costs. And that doesn't do a service to the American people to do that with your rules. But they're better than they were when they were proposed, which at least is a tiny step in the right direction.
Scott Segal with Bracewell and Giuliani, not the Scott Segal who's married to Robin Davis. How do you know that? How do you know that? You didn't know us? You know West Virginia?
Well, I know I don't live too far from your area. I live. I used to live in Maryland. I now live in the District of Columbia, so not too far away. But you know, a friend of mine who lives in West Virginia said, "Hey, did you know there's a cat here that some big old trial lawyer?" I said, "How about that?"
Yeah, exactly.
That's a different. Tell your listeners though, that's a different neck of the legal forest.
I understand. Scott's
he sues my clients.
Very successfully, by the way, many times. But
yeah.
Hey, Scott, listen. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He's a big dog fan, though, I understand. So.
Oh. Hey, Scott, great talking to you. I appreciate your insights.